Trump's tariff threat could collapse $840 billion. Partnership America and Mexico may be neighbors and partners, but their economic future is heading into uncharted waters. Here's the shocking truth. A trade storm is brewing that could redraw the entire North American economy. For decades, U.S. Mexico relations were stable compared to the tensions with China or even Canada. But that calm may be ending. And if it does, the impact won't just stop at the border. It could ripple across every American household, from the cars you drive to the food on your table. Before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe, give this video a like, and share it so you never miss these breaking global updates. For years, Mexico avoided the worst of Trump's tariffs. While Canada was slammed with steel duties and Brazil faced 50% agricultural tariffs, Mexico found a way to sidestep the harshest blows. The secret was a pragmatic bargain: cooperate with Washington on security and immigration in exchange for breathing room on trade. That strategy worked. Mexico extradited cartel leaders, strengthened border checks, and gave Washington symbolic victories on crime and migration. In return, its export machine kept running. By 2024, U.S. Mexico trade hit $840 billion, making Mexico America's single largest trading partner, ahead of both China and Canada. But now everything may change. The upcoming review of the U.S. Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, on October 4th is no ordinary check-in. It reopens negotiations on an already fragile deal, one that itself replaced NAFTA after years of bitter debate in 2019. And this time, the stakes are even higher. Mexico is worried, and for good reason. The Biden years kept tariffs relatively stable, but Trump's second term has been different. Tariffs have been his favorite weapon, first against China, then against Canada, and now possibly Mexico. Tariff rates on some goods have already jumped from 2.5% to 25%, and temporary suspensions on auto part tariffs expire within 2 years. That means Mexico's biggest industry, automotive exports, could be the next casualty. For perspective, cars, trucks, and auto parts account for nearly 30% of Mexico's exports to the U.S. Ford, GM, and Stellantis all rely heavily on Mexican factories. If Trump slaps 30–50% tariffs on those imports, the shock would be enormous, not just for Mexico, but for American car buyers. Vehicles assembled in Detroit but dependent on Mexican parts would instantly become more expensive. And remember, Mexico isn't just exporting cars. It's America's largest supplier of avocados, tomatoes, beer, medical devices, and electronics. If tariffs spread beyond autos, you could see grocery store prices surge and even shortages in key categories. So why is Trump threatening Mexico now? The official line is about supply chain security. Washington wants to reduce reliance on foreign suppliers and pull production back inside U.S. borders. Mexico fears it's being lumped in with China and India, despite being a neighbor, ally, and member of USMCA. The irony? Mexico has already moved closer to Washington's playbook. Just months ago, Mexico imposed 50% tariffs on 1,500 product categories from China, essentially mirroring U.S. trade policy. Officials even copied the style and wording of Washington's tariff documents. In other words, Mexico bent over backwards to align itself with Trump's America First agenda. But alignment may not be enough. The U.S. Treasury Secretary has floated the idea of a fortress North America, a closed loop of supply chains within the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Sounds nice on paper. But if tariffs remain uneven, with Japan, South Korea, and the EU getting sweetheart deals while Mexico faces penalties, then Fortress North America could look more like Fortress America, with Mexico left outside the walls. That risk is very real. Trump has already signed preferential tariff agreements with Japan and South Korea, lowering duties for Asian allies while raising them for Mexico. If that continues, Mexico could lose its competitive advantage in industries like automobiles, electronics, and agriculture. And then there's the elephant in the room: immigration. For decades, U.S.-Mexico trade disputes have been tied to border politics. Trump has repeatedly threatened to slap tariffs on Mexico unless it does more to stop migration. In 2019, he nearly followed through with 25% tariffs, only backing down after Mexico agreed to tighten border enforcement. With migration numbers once again rising in 2025, that threat could return at any moment. This linkage between tariffs and immigration puts Mexico in an impossible position. Comply too much, and critics at home accuse it of bowing to Washington. Resist, and it risks an economic shock that could devastate industries. So where does this leave us? If tariffs hit, Mexico faces a double crisis: economic pain from lost exports and political fallout from appearing weak against U.S. pressure. For the United States, the consequences would also be severe. American consumers already struggling with inflation would see prices rise on cars, groceries, and manufactured goods. Small businesses that depend on Mexican supply chains could face closures. And don't forget, Canada just walked away from a $60 billion submarine deal with U.S. firms, turning instead to Germany and South Korea. If Mexico joins Canada in pushing back against Washington, the entire structure of North American trade could unravel. But Mexico does have some cards to play. First, its geographic proximity makes it almost irreplaceable. Supply chains built over decades can't be rewired overnight. Shifting production from Mexico back to the U.S. would take years and billions of dollars. Second, Mexico's labor force remains highly competitive. Wages are lower than in the U.S., but higher than in parts of Asia, creating a sweet spot for mid-cost manufacturing. Companies like Tesla, GM, and Intel have all expanded operations there in recent years. Third, Mexico is already diversifying. It's strengthening ties with the European Union through updated trade deals and exploring deeper links with South America. If U.S. tariffs bite too hard, Mexico may accelerate those alternatives, reducing its dependence on Washington. The bottom line is this: the upcoming USMCA review could mark the most significant turning point in U.S. Mexico trade in decades. What began as a quiet partnership built on compromise is now facing its biggest test. If Washington pushes too hard, it risks not only damaging Mexico's economy, but also undermining its own consumers, businesses, and credibility. For Mexico, the challenge is to defend its industries while keeping relations stable enough to avoid open conflict. Whether it succeeds may depend on President Claudia Sheinbaum's ability to balance diplomacy with defiance. And here's the bigger picture. If Canada has already broken ranks with the U.S. on defense contracts and Mexico begins to pivot on trade, then America's grip on its closest allies is slipping. Add in the rise of multipolar power blocks, with Europe, Asia, and Latin America exploring alternatives, and you start to see a world where Washington no longer calls all the shots. That's why this story matters far beyond the headlines. It's not just about tariffs or trade deals. It's about whether the era of uncontested U.S. dominance is ending. So the question we should all be asking is this: will Trump's hardline tariff strategy bring Mexico back in line? Or will it push America's biggest trading partner to finally chart its own course, even if that means breaking with Washington? Because if Mexico turns away, the dominoes won't stop there. If you found this breakdown useful, give the video a like right now, subscribe, and share it. It really helps us keep going. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next deep dive into global power shifts. This isn't just about trade policy. It's about the future of America's role in the world. And the world is watching.